This is a special podcast looking ahead to GWEC's APAC Wind Energy Summit held this year in Melbourne, Australia from the 16th to the 18th of September. Get your tickets at apacsummit2025.com.au.
My name's Stewart Mullin. I'm the Chief Industry Officer at the Global Wind Energy Council, and today we are giving you a bit of a sneak peek into our upcoming APAC Wind Energy Conference, which we are having in Melbourne on the 16th to the 18th of September. And joining me on the line today is Charles Rattray, who is the CEO of the Southerly Ten. Charles is actually going to be doing what we call a REX talk, which is the GWEC equivalent of a TED talk, which we tend to do as part of the opening sessions in each time we have an APAC summit. So Charles, first of all, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Hey, listen, just before we get into the topic of your REX talk, I just want to give the listeners a bit of background about yourself. So I believe that you grew up in the Western Districts where there's actually some offshore wind farms planned for the moment.
I spent a lot of my childhood chasing dairy cows around at my father's instruction at terrible times in the morning, and the weather there, going to be blowing wind and rain coming in sideways, and me on my little motorcycle at 5 o'clock in the morning. It certainly toughens you up.
Yeah. And so what was your pathway into offshore wind, and how did you get to be CEO of the Southerly Ten?
Oh, look, it's great fortune, really, that I've managed to get here. My career actually started in the military, which is a whole other story, not for now. But I spent quite a lot of time in the investment community on a range of things, including renewables. So I spent a lot of time with Macquarie in renewables area, and after that had a number of careers in industry, regulated utilities, unregulated, new business areas. And just before joining Star of the South and forming Southerly Ten, the developer, I was in an onshore portfolio with some gas peaking, some battery storage, and onshore wind. And
wow.
and after we sort of got that business up and ready for the next investor, I was just really fortunate that I met the team at Star of the South, and sort of a coffee turned into a career.
That's really interesting. I mean, particularly that onshore wind and gas peaking. I mean, that's, like we're talking about sort of dispatchable renewables and getting right through for onshore wind. I mean, actually, the conference this year is actually going to talk a lot about onshore wind, and we're looking to develop a lot around this onshore wind, and particularly around the O&M area and these hybrid projects. So a couple of other of these interviews that we'll do later will touch on that. But today we wanted to focus on the offshore wind, I guess, opportunities for Australia. And as the CEO of Southerly Ten, I guess you guys are, and also including Star of the South, you guys are probably in pole position for the Gippsland auctions. But we wanted to cover today looking at what barriers are there for the acceleration of offshore wind in Australia, and perhaps how we can extrapolate that even for what lessons learnt around the APAC region.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, happy to talk about that. I think that's the opening comments I'd make, Stuart, and then we can decide where to dive after that. Is an extraordinary amount of work has been undertaken in Australia to develop an industry here, and a lot of the sort of core pillars that you need are in place. And so, we'll talk about barriers, and I think that's a really important discussion. What I'd also say, there's some really encouraging bodies of work undertaken by proponents, communities, governments, state, federal, and local. We've got a regulatory regime set up, we've got a licensing plan and program, we've got an auction announced. There's a whole lot of really good things happening. But happy to talk about the barriers when we get into the discussion.
Sure. So for the faint-hearted, offshore wind is probably not the area you want to go. I mean, I think the Southerly Ten, I don't know when you guys started, the Star of the South rather, I don't know when that project started. I mean, as far back as I can remember, and my career starts in wind starts back in 2008, but in my offshore wind career sort of was around 2014. And I reckon it must have been almost around there where you guys started in the at least the Star of the South team started to explore that. And if we're talking sort of like 2028 to 2032 installation, that's a huge development time. I mean, there's not too many sort of like infrastructure projects that take 15 years to develop.
Well, I think the first thing is a lot of these projects take longer than perhaps we give them credit for or acknowledge. It's a huge undertaking to get these sort of system-wide changing legacy projects. And so Star of the South in various iterations has had a sort of 10-year life. CIP has not been in for 10 years, like half that time. And really the genesis of the project was the three founders. And interestingly, the thesis that they had is true, that the onshore portfolio delivers a fantastic product. It delivers bulk energy to the Victorian market. And we also have this fantastic wind resource off the coast of Victoria that generates at a different time to the onshore portfolio. And the hypothesis they had 10 years ago was actually we need both of those generation profiles to replace the aging coal fleet. And largely that thesis remains. And so the benefits of offshore wind, in particular, there's a lot of them, but in particular, it's that low correlation with the onshore portfolio, and we have very good generation in winter into that heating load, and on those really hot, high pressure systems where we've got higher conditioning load, and you've often got a lot of constraints onshore. Offshore is really delivering a lot of energy at that time.
Yeah, so one of the things that I kind of admire about the Star of the South project, and also how offshore wind's developed in Australia, is that, I mean, the industry came and saw an opportunity for offshore wind. And I mean, what you said exactly covers it off, and it makes sense that that's where we're actually focusing our endeavours. But I mean, we've kind of dragged the governments into that area. I mean, and so, like you saw, we've seen the Victorian government get on board, and then when the Labor government came into power in its first term, I think Minister Bowen was a big supporter and really got on board. He signed Australia up straight away to the Global Offshore Wind Alliance, and he put all of the signals in the international market that he's right involved and wants to make sure that offshore wind happens. And then, with the re-election, there's also, looks like, we've got another 3 to 4 years of being able to, I guess, focus on offshore wind development. How important is that government piece and that government support, both at the state and federal level, for someone like Southerly Ten?
Yeah, I mean, it's super important. These mega projects, and in fact, onshore renewables also need alignment across government. There's one thing that I just want to add to your introduction there. The legislation for the offshore energy industry was actually introduced by the previous government, and one of the things that is really important to projects like ours is you need to be able to survive the political cycle. You need to appeal to a really broad group from a political standpoint. Yep. And it was the Prime Minister, Angus Taylor, who introduced that legislation, and then it became law under, and as you say, and Minister Bowen has really progressed things in terms of declaring areas and getting appropriate arrangements in place for the various regulations and whatnot. So, that's one of the things we've been really focused on, and we talk a lot to all sides of politics. We don't sort of focus on on one. What I would say is having Victorian government being sort of really pushing hard, and the leader at a state level has been really helpful. And Minister D'Ambrosio has been on this journey the whole time, and been one of the biggest advocates for offshore wind, and her leadership on that, and support by from both premiers in the time that I've been here, being the prior Dan Andrews, and now the Premier Jacinta Allen, and so there has been that support from both sides of all dimensions of politics, and it's really critical to our success, or hopeful success anyway.
Yeah, right. And that's really great when things are going well. I mean, but then there's that alignment between the state and federal government. I mean, I've heard that at a CEC conference earlier this year, I heard Minister D'Ambrosio in part of a plenary presentation talk about, well, of course, the federal government's going to need to find some way of supporting, or to be partnering with us, and whatever that partnership model looks like. I'm not exactly sure what that looks like. And then, I mean, I know that Minister Bowen or the federal government also has to find something that works for all states, but not all states are at the same level of maturity. So how does that work, and how does that affect the visibility for example, your route to market, perhaps, in a project like this?
Yeah, well, I'd say we fit neatly into that discussion. And so, any negotiation that happens between the state and federal government, that's not my area to comment on.
Sure.
But what I would say is there's a lot of things you need to go right to deliver a sector like the offshore wind industry. And one of the things you need a first project. You need a project, and whether that's Star of the South or any other project, you need those first turbines in the water. That demonstrates to the supply chain, to investors, to everyone involved, that you can get environmental approval, that the ports can handle the equipment as it gets brought into the country if it's brought from elsewhere, that the vessels will arrive and actually install the foundations and turbines. So that first project is actually what de-risks a lot of future investment, and so I don't see those things being at odds. I don't see the idea that that the federal government would want something that has a federal view of the world, and the Victorian government would say, well, we want something that works for Victoria because we're advanced. I don't see those as independent. I see those as working together, and that we would love for Star of the South to be we'd love to be the first project that is sort of part of that story. Hey, look, this can happen in Australia. We are committed to it.
Yep. And I also heard from my last visit to Australia that we were waiting for what was I think called the NEM review to hit to drop, and I believe it actually just dropped today. We're recording this on the 6th of August, so I believe that actually dropped in Australia today. You haven't had a chance to read through the 5,000 pages of it, or whatever it is.
Yeah, it did actually. It dropped. The draft report came out today, the 6th of August. 4 really well credentialed industry leaders were tasked with pulling this together. Now, it's not 5,000 pages, but I think it's about 200 pages. I haven't read it line by line, and what they talk about is really focused on 2030 and beyond, which was in their terms of reference, and they've got a whole range of suggestions in there. What I think is really pleasing, and we met with them on a number of occasions, is they've acknowledged that what they're proposing tells part of the story, but that offshore wind is going to need some specific interventions, or some investment made to make sure the industry is successful, and they really call that out in the draft. Like I said, I do need to read the whole thing in detail, but at a first blush, it looks to sort of attack the really big issues for renewables. We we'd like to have long-term offtake. That's a big tick, and then they really talk a lot about that.
So from where you sit as CEO of one of the most advanced projects in Australia, what do you think is really needed? Like, if you had to pick sort of like the top 3 things that we need to get right now that are going to either remove barriers or to help accelerate, what would you focus on?
So the number one, the number one is sticking to our timeframes and keeping momentum, and what that means to us as Star of the South is we've got a timeline laid out there, put out there for the turbines in the water, for the targets that the Victorian government has set. We've got a time frame for an offtake process to be run, which is end of this quarter, start of next quarter. We really need to stick to that and make sure that those things are successful. And we'll need to see other things as part of that momentum. So the other thing we need to see momentum on, and part of that is in our court, is the environmental approval process. Okay. And so Star of the South, we're very well progressed in terms of all of our technical reports and chapters and engagement with regulators, and we're sort of wrapping that piece up, ready to commence the authorisation process pretty soon. And so some of that's with us to do, and then what we'll be hoping to work through with government and regulators, and we are getting a lot of great engagement, is, all right, now that we've made an assessment of that, and we've got a view on what the impacts might be and mitigations might be, we'll need to see that, the project progressing through that, and the investors will need to see, there's progress on an environmental approval for a project such as Star of the South. And then I think the other thing, and this is not, none of this is to say transmission and ports are not important. They're definitely in my top 5. But if it's just top 3, I would include community with that. We've enjoyed an amazing relationship with all of the communities in Gippsland and surrounds who are potentially impacted, but also can potentially participate in any benefits that a project like this might bring, like economic growth. That's a very fragile and precious relationship, or set of relationships, and we need to be really true to that and maintain that goodwill and great set of relationships that we have, and we need to respect it. If we lose that, if we do things as an industry or as a proponent that means we lose that, then there's no industry. We've got to really work closely with that group.
Yeah, it's clear when you speak to people in Australia, particularly from the Gippsland community, that that the engagement that has been done down there, for me, it looks like a best practice scenario. I mean, I've been in offshore wind for a long time, and I've seen a lot of community engagement. But what you've done in Gippsland and becoming part of the community and bringing all the community groups along and being exceptionally transparent, I think that's like that transparency that you've had with the community around benefits, etc. I think that's something that's going to play huge. Give a huge benefit to the community as well. Like, I think that it's been fantastic. So that's great to see. I would also say that if you look at the other zones around Australia, there's been a lot of sort of like community. I don't know, maybe not resentment, but at least in the lead up to the last election, we saw a lot of like disinformation campaigns around some of the zones, and. How important is it to Gippsland that these other zones get up? And is there anything that these other communities can take from Gippsland? And is there a lot of cross-pollination between communities? Because they are sort of like the demographic of the coastal communities can be quite similar. I know that's a generalisation, but I mean, some of these coastal communities, they can learn from each other. They can look to each other to see, okay, how are you guys doing this? Which is what's happened around Europe, where you've seen it sort of like the spread from community to community, where people have seen, they can come and see, offshore wind parks that have been erected already and think, oh, okay, this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like in reality. And the reality, when you see it in reality, you understand, okay, this isn't dangerous. This isn't disrupting the coastline or whatever the.
Yeah, so I think it's really dangerous for us as an industry to discount the perspectives of communities where this isn't popular. Like I think we can easily dismiss things as that's on this social media or that forum or it was political or whatever. So I think we've got to be really cautious about downplaying that topic.
Okay.
And for some people, this is a passion for them that they don't want to see, for whatever reason, they don't want to see turbines off the coast, and I think it's important we listen to that. What we have found, and thank you for your very generous comments earlier about the team that we have in Gippsland. What we have found is it does take time for people to get their heads around something like Star of the South. And if you go into those discussions authentically, then you're able to hear the nature of the protests. You're able to hear the nature of the disagreement. You're able to really understand why people don't want, for whatever reason. Whereas if you go in with a skepticism about their perspective, you probably won't hear what they've got to say. And then the other thing is, so that's on one side. The other thing is, I go back to the point I made earlier, which is that's why it's so important to make sure that we're all aligned about Gippsland, and we respect the communities that are going to be impacted or potentially benefit, and we get on with the job of trying to get these turbines into the ocean and delivering energy. Because it's that proof of concept that will get the supply chain sorted out, show communities what this looks like, demonstrate the benefits of something like Star of the South or the other projects in the region. And you make a very good point around the cross-pollination. And it's when we see those things happening, we'll have more ability to have that cross-pollination between different regions. And the Gippsland community has been really helpful when we've started to look into some of these other regions, and have been very happy to talk about their experience and what they see. And that will only get stronger when we're into the delivery side of this, because people will see, actually this is how it played out. And so that's why, Stuart, I'm just, I personally, but also the team, we're so focused on let's get projects into the water.
Sure. Well, we didn't want to cover off all of your Rex talk. We want to leave some fruit on the vine for the APAC Summit. But again, we thank you very much for Southerly Ten for being an event ambassador for the summit this year, and we very much look forward to having you there. Is there any people or anything that you're looking forward to for the summit this year?
The thing that I always find in a summit is you get a real sense for the finger on the pulse of where people are at. And, a couple of years ago, when we just had a regional conference, which is an excellent conference, there was a real positivity. There's a real positivity. And then you've seen in the last couple of years some dwindling excitement as people have started to see the realities of this and reality of that. And I think we're probably in a slightly different place now, and I think this will be a great opportunity to really go and speak to a lot of different people in our industry and get a sense for where they're at, and people hopefully are feeling pretty positive about our path.
Yeah, so we'll be at the GWEC team. We're working with the Ocean Energy Pathway organisation, who'll be bringing a team of people down there to also look at best practices around community engagement and this I guess, accelerating the uptake of offshore wind. We're also working with the Global Offshore Wind Alliance, who will be having a GOA meeting down there, a closed-door GOA meeting down there, which the industry, GOA members and the industry will be invited to, but that's a governmental forum. And then we're also bringing a World Bank delegation from several countries, including Vietnam, Philippines, Colombia, and South Africa, that are looking to Australia to see like what's happening in Australia and what can they learn from Australia and what can they take back to their own countries that will help to accelerate the offshore wind. So we're hoping from an offshore wind perspective that there's a lot of discussion and a lot of cross-pollination of these ideas and that we can actually learn something as an industry. I mean, because one of the things that our members have asked us for, and one of the reasons why we do this conference, is that this isn't just an Australian conference. This isn't an Australian conference. If we're going to have supply chains that function, we're going to have avoid the boom and bust cycles of markets. We have to actually take a more regional approach to a lot of these things. So we're hoping that by us creating the forum, and we are the only forum that looks at us, the sort of whole APAC in these areas. We're hoping by creating these forums and building these, we can actually create these government networks, these industry networks that actually help us as an industry in 2 to 3 years' time or 4 years' time, when you guys are starting to actually get turbines in the water and things are happening in there, and you need a supply chain to be fully engaged and committed to developing this. Hopefully by that stage we've got those regional partnerships all humming at that stage. So we see this as a really significant moment in time, and we hope, and we're very glad for, again, your support in this, and we look forward to seeing you in Melbourne.
Fantastic.
And one thing that we didn't cover off, which when Charles and I are always together, we always speak about football, and I was hoping, I'm a Carlton supporter for those listening in Australia. I'm a Carlton supporter, and so I had hoped that when we were 2 years ago, when we were planning this summit in September, that I would be able to stay a couple of weeks longer to see the Blues salute, but it looks like they'll be finished before I get there.
Yeah, I mean, it really does. And as a Brisbane ex-Fitzroy supporter, it couldn't happen to a better team. But we're always taking new members, Stewart, and I'm sure we can rustle up a Brisbane membership and a scarf, and we can get you along to you can actually see some finals football.
Yeah. Maybe that's the key. I have to, because there's no other team in the competition that I can barrack for, perhaps except for the Giants. I don't have a soft spot for the Giants, but anyway, good luck for the Bears and for the Bears, the Lions, and I guess we'll see you in September.
Yeah, really appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you in person.
Thanks, Charles. Thanks for listening. If you like what you've heard, there's more of that and many more discussions to be had at the APAC Wind Energy Summit on the 16th to the 18th of September at the Melbourne Exhibition and Convention Centre. GWEC will be there with a host of thought leaders from around the industry, having discussions around onshore wind, offshore wind, O&M, and much, much more. Make sure you pick up your tickets today, and we look forward to seeing you there.